Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. This will be part two of my Underground Railroad from New York City metropolitan area, Standard Metropolitan Statistical Area, SMSA, Manhattan, New York, to include the greater areas of New Rochelle, Mount Vernon, the Bronx, Queens, Long Island, and Manhattan, home to Columbia University, as well as Bellevue State Hospital. And I do consider Columbia University and Bellevue State Mental Hospital sort of clandestine service parallel entities. Okay? And the reason I consider that was that thank you to Jewish doctor Albert Laverne, medical doctor, psychiatrist, who worked for MKUltra, and Sidney Gottlieb, who is from the Bronx, New York. Sidney Gottlieb, chemical engineer from California Institute of Technology. Sidney Gottlieb put in charge of MKUltra restructuring your brain after Artichoke and Monarch and other CIA mind control policies. We founded MKUltra for the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, the Oracle, the all-knowing Oracle database. That's where that name came from, people. Ampex Corporation built the Oracle database that everybody thinks Larry Ellison created. No, he didn't. Larry Ellison is a fake billionaire college dropout for University of Illinois, Urbana, and he was the CEO of the sales company known as Oracle. The database was created by Ampex, which is across the street in Redwood City, California, and they are a contractor for the military industrial complex, which their best customer is the CIA. That is Oracle, and that's where the name came from. The CIA named the database that. Thinking that if they knew all your habits, all your texting, all your emails, all your voice recognition, touch tones, that they could predict the future and how best to pacify and control you as a sheep on the planet Earth. That's the point of the Oracle database, to collect your privacy so that you'll have no privacy and the artificial intelligence can herd you around like an Australian sheepdog typically would. All right, so a couple of housekeeping details. I wanted to revisit the Hollywood Jewish-controlled management system over there with respect to CBS, the evil eye, the Masonic evil eye of CBS, which created Columbia Pictures, which they created in 1924. I just want you to know, besides financing the creation of Columbia Pictures out in Hollywood, they also assigned 3 Jewish managers to that project, and I want you to know their names, so that, because I did leave them out in my part 1 video. Okay, I mean, we talked about Warner Brothers, whose real name is Wansel, a Yiddish name, Harry Wansel, Jack Wansel, Sam Wansel, Albert Wansel, renamed Warner. Harry Warner, Jack Warner, Sam Warner, Albert Warner. Warner Brothers, 4 Jewish men. And with Columbia Pictures, the Masonic evil eye of CBS, they assigned Jack and Harry Cohn, spelled C-O-H-N, Cohn, Jack and Harry, and of course they assigned Joe Brandenburg to be the adult supervision in the room. Of course, he changed his name, sort of like Oliver Stone changed his name from Silverstein to Stone. Well, Joseph Brandenburg, he changed his name to Brandt to sound less Jewish. So it was Joe Brandt, Jack Cohen, Harry Cohn were the executive managers of CBS Columbia Pictures. And that went on for 6 to 8 years before it was spun off into another entity within the Hollywood construct of private banking. Anyway, very important that you know that Roy and Walt Disney received their financing essentially from Harry Warner, a.k.a. Wansel, through his secretary, Margaret Winkler, and Winkler Productions. In other words, it's all one big happy private banking, secret money laundering facility that created Hollywood. Now I'm going to turn my attention to the private banking Jewish people that we touched on in part one. So if you followed part one, the names that you should know would be Jerome Colberg from New Rochelle, New York, who was born in Poland as a Jew and escaped to New York. And so as a Polish Jewish gentleman, I think he was living in Austria, but there was some issue as to whether it was Austria or whether it was Poland. But the point is, it's in that general zip code north of Auschwitz. You know, it's where that's where Wojtek Frykowski and Jerzy Kaczynski came from. The same general area that Jerome Colberg came from before he went to New York and to New Rochelle. And then we have Eugene Kleiner. He founded Kleiner Perkins Caulfield Byers in 1972. Actually, Caulfield and Byers came later, but it was just Tom Perkins and Eugene Kleiner in 1972 that founded Kleiner Perkins. They're located at 2750 Sand Hill Road. 2750 Sand Hill Road. You know, that's next door to where Aaron Valente went missing. Aaron Valente, age 33, Georgetown Jesuit, indoctrinated Aaron Valente. She used to work at Summit Partners down the hill on Middleton Road in Menlo Park. She had an appointment with the managing director of KKR, Jerome Colberg's company, Excel, KKR Excel, at 2500 Sand Hill Road. You know, it's about 150 meters away from where Eugene Kleiner would have an office, and Tom Perkins would have an office at Kleiner Perkins. They bragged that they brought you. Companies such as LSI Logic, Electronic Arts, Sun Microsystems, Google, Amazon, AOL, Tandem, Lotus Development Company, Intuit. That's Eugene Kleiner's company. That's what they brag about. Their biggest brag, of course, is the DNA reengineering of human beings at Genentech, which is now owned by Roush pharmaceutical giant. But anyway, Genentech has the gall to name their world headquarters address DNA, Avenue. All right, what I'm trying to tell you is that Eugene Kleiner had an office at 2750 Sand Hill Road. That is walking distance, and it's a very short walk to Sequoia Capital, which is Don Valentine from the Bronx. Sequoia Capital brought you FTX. Sequoia Capital brought you many of the same companies that Kleiner Perkins likes to boast about. See, if you study the Charlie Manson case, or you study 9/11, if you study Pearl Harbor, if you study the Zodiac killing, you will come up with mendacities and poppycock in every direction. And we have that kind of preposterous storytelling with these so-called pioneers of venture capital, okay? Like these people are special heroes that have amassed $6 to $8 billion in personal wealth, that they're some kind of genius, having never created a product in their whole lives. That didn't Jesus kick out the bankers, the money changers from the synagogue? Didn't he throw them out of the temple? I mean, that was one of the stories, right? That he didn't like bankers, which maybe he ended up on the cross, crucified because of his relationship with the bankers. Maybe, huh? You think? Anyway, what I'm trying to tell you is that all of these companies, KKR, which is Jerome Colberg from New Rochelle, New York, partnered through Bear Stearns with the upstarts, the young upstarts who joined him, Henry Kravis and George Roberts, who are younger. They're from Oklahoma and Texas. They even had a movie dedicated to Henry Kravis, Barbarians at the Gate. I think I said Tommy Lee Jones was in that film. I was wrong. It was the guy from Mannix, James Garner. James Garner from Stalag 17. He played the president of RGR Nabisco. And Another actor played Henry Kravis as the greedy financial terrorist, leveraged buyout private banker. Henry Kravis was portrayed. I will give you the name of the actor who played Henry Kravis in Barbarians at the Gate. I know a little bit something about that because my office handled the due diligence on that transaction that was going down in the 1980s. I was there. I was present. I didn't work on the case, but I knew we assigned a third of the office to the RJR Nabisco transaction, which was spearheaded by Henry Kravis and KKR at 2800 Sand Hill Road, which is the same address that Don Valentine and Doug Leone have offices at 2800 Sand Hill Road. So you know from watching my videos, we have Sequoia Capital, which is at 2800 Sand Hill Road. We have Kleiner Perkins Private Banking, who finances military complex startups, and they're at 2750 Sand Hill Road. And then they're both started in 1972 at the exact same time across the parking lot from each other. But then in 1976, Jerome Colberg rolls into town with KKR, and he opens his office where Don Valentine has already established the office at 2800. So you're talking about three premier clandestine service bankers that are located in two office addresses, 2800 Sand Hill Road and 2750 Sand Hill Road. Google it. And when you're Googling it, try to tell me what happened to Erin Valente. She was at 2500 Sand Hill Road, which is, a half a block away from Kleiner Perkins and from Doug Leone over at Sequoia Capital and Jerome Colberg at Kleiner Perkins. No, KKR. Henry Kravis and George Roberts. And Erin Valente was meeting with a managing director from KKR who went to Harvard University and had an MBA from Stanford. You should also know from watching my videos that Abigail Folger was a private banker, right? She didn't have an MBA from Stanford or from Harvard. She went to Harvard. She had a master's degree from Harvard in art history, okay? Abigail Folger, she played classical piano and spoke fluent French, which I don't think Tom Perkins could speak. He was in a manslaughter murder case in France, and he couldn't speak French. Tom Perkins. He owns a 289-foot sailboat that he told CBS 60 Minutes that cost more than $150 million, but less than $300 million. He ended up selling it for $60 million, much less than what he told CBS it costs to build. Anyway, he crashed into a sailboat off the coast of France, killing a medical doctor on the sailboat, and because he didn't yield the right of way to the other boat, and he was found guilty in a French courtroom, had to pay a $10,000 fine, no prison time, no harm, no foul, but he feels that he was mistreated in the justice system that is France. Hey, Tom Perkins, close your pie hole, okay? Nobody believes anything you say. We're under maritime law. They're under maritime law in France. They're under maritime law in the United States. If you don't think that's the exact program that goes on here in your delusional California, you are lost in space. Now, fortunately, Tom Perkins has gone on to heaven. He's gone to where Jack Ruby went, Jacob Rubenstein, and where Mark Levin Lane went. So Tom Perkins, don't know if you're Jewish or not. I suspect you are, but you have a Jewish right. You have a Jewish wife. Daniel Steele, not her real name, right? She's a Jewish lady from New York City. Daniel Steele, romance novelist, second wife to Tom Perkins, who's the founder of Kleiner Perkins, along with Eugene Kleiner Perkins. Oh my goodness. All right, so you'll know that we have Kleiner Perkins, and we have Eugene Kleiner, and we have Tom Perkins, and then we have Sequoia Capital with Don Valentine from the Bronx and Fordham University, and we have Doug Leone, who's from Mount Vernon, New York, which is 6.5 miles north of Fordham University, and he went to Columbia University, and he went to Cornell University before that, and he went to MIT, Sloan Business School to get an MBA. After going to Spooksville, Columbia, he went to Spooksville, MIT, where Sam Bankman-Fried went. And he financed Sam Bankman-Fried. Doug Leone financed Sam Bankman-Fried. He did. Doug Leone of Sequoia Capital, $213 million wire transfer over to Sam Bankman-Fried, who's no longer freed. Are you seeing here the sharks, the barbarians at the gate, the sharks circling the 289-foot sailboat that's owned by Tom Perkins? You'd also recognize the name of Jerome Colberg from New Rochelle and his Bear Stearns partners, Henry Kravis and George Roberts, who are all Jewish. All of those three people are Jewish. Okay? And then we know for a fact that Eugene Kleiner is Jewish. And we don't know about Don Valentine. Don Valentine has no parents. Don Valentine has no wife. He has 3 children and 6 grandchildren, but he has no wife. And he has no parents. So it's very difficult to know if Don Valentine was Jewish or not because they've deleted that part of history. So it's what they did with Charlie Manson, whose real name is Charlie Maddox. Charles Miles Maddox. Charles Miles Maddox. Why do you have to come to my channel to find out that there was never a Charlie Manson in the first place? That it was a made-up for television fake name that happens to be the same name borrowed from CBS, the Masonic Evil Eye's pornography division, which was entitled Manson International in 1953, before Charles Miles Maddox was ever part of any kind of a psyop CIA story. We had CBS and Manson International in Hollywood, San Fernando Valley, home to porn. All right, I wanted to tell you some stories here that create some understanding that Abigail Folger, whose grandparents were ambassadors to El Salvador and lived off of a land trust, which meant that they got paid money from probably drug distribution activities in Central America and or installations on their properties in San Salvador area. And that Peter Folger, who was inherited the Folger Coffee Company, they were in the importation of coffee bean business from Latin America and Central America, and that would line up with State Department clearances to be able to bring cargo containers into the United States, which have coffee beans on them. But they also could have, cocaine products or heroin products from Honduras or Colombia or other parts of Central America, like Guatemala, for example, or Mexico, for another example. And so the idea that Peter Folger would marry Inés Mejia, who's the daughter of her parents, who are State Department CIA clearance people, makes sense. They didn't stay married, but they had 2 children. They had Abigail Folger, who played classical piano and spoke fluent French, and they had Peter Folger Jr., who attended Catholic schools in San Francisco. And that makes sense. And Abigail had no financial or banking training per se, and yet she was taken. Her parents, her mother also spoke fluent French and played the piano. So she had no formal financial banking training, and yet there she is in Haight-Ashbury Project for CIA, in charge of the budget and the paymaster services for CIA operatives, Timothy Leary, Bill Graham, who's really a Russian Jewish person from Germany through New York City, named Wolf Grajanka. She's in charge of Jim Jones People's Temple. She's in charge of Sharon Tate's father, Paul Tate. She's in charge of Hunter S. Thompson, gonzo journalist for CIA. She's in charge of Ken Kesey, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Ken Kesey. She's in charge of making sure he gets his expense report reimbursed, right? Who am I missing? I mean, it's the who's who. Louis Jolion West, who works for Sidney Gottlieb, who's from the Bronx, New York, a Jewish chemical engineer who's in charge of mind restructuring called MKUltra, and his boy is Louis Jolyon West Rosenberg, and he's a Jewish boy from Brooklyn. Louis Jolyon West is from Brooklyn. He's a Jewish gentleman from Brooklyn, and he's in charge of MKUltra, and he's working with Timothy Leary, and he is the only medical doctor at the Haight-Ashbury Project because the director, David Smith, is not a physician. He's not a medical doctor. He has a PhD in pharmacology from the University of California, San Francisco, and he's conducting injection experiments on mice using amphetamines and LSD at the San Francisco State General Hospital, San Francisco General, which has been renamed Mark Zuckerberg Hospital. That's where Paul Pelosi's fake hammer attack injury was attended to. It's the furthest hospital away from Pacific Heights where the infamous fake hammer attack that didn't happen happened. You know, they do have a hospital walking distance called Pacific Presbyterian Medical Center, and for some reason they didn't take them there. That's actually the best hospital in San Francisco. And the worst hospital is the Mark Zuckerberg Hospital. That's the worst hospital. Has the worst reputation over the last 50 years. And that's where they took private banker, secret banker Paul Pelosi, Jesuit educated from Georgetown University, and has a master's degree in business from NYU, New York University, Georgetown Jesuit, and St. Ignatius de Loyola High School in Haight-Ashbury. Paul Pelosi. So I want to concentrate on 3 Jewish private bankers. I'm going to give you their names. So I'm going to talk about Eugene Kleiner. Did he come from under a rock or was he chosen? Okay, and then I'm going to talk about Tom Perkins. Did he come from under a rock or was he chosen? And I'm going to talk about Don Valentine. Did he come from under a rock or was he chosen? Those 3. And look, I want to talk about Doug Leone. I want to talk, because he's in the here and now. Those 3 people I just told you, they're all dead. Abigail Folger, she's dead too. And she didn't have any particular training, but she could have been one of those 3 people. Abigail Folger could have founded Kleiner Perkins. She could have founded Sequoia Capital. She could have founded KKR. Because you know what? None of those people have banking experience, okay? They have engineering backgrounds. They went to MIT, Columbia. They went to Harvard. They don't know a thing about banking. None of them had a banking background. None of them. And that's my point. They have no special knowledge. They don't know how to build anything. They never had a lemonade stand. They were all chosen, just like Abigail Folger was. Except Abigail Folger got bayoneted 28 times with the business end of an M7 NATO bayonet. But hey, Tom Perkins could have been bayoneted. Eugene Kleiner could have been bayoneted. Harry and Jack Warner brothers could have been bayoneted. But I guess they were obedient soldiers that always said, yes, sir, and obeyed their orders. That's the distinction between someone who's dead, like William Holden, or like Noreen Kid Shatner at the bottom of William Shatner's swimming pool, Beam Me Up Scotty, on the anniversary of Sharon Tate's death. That's why Sharon Tate is dead. That is why Abigail Folger is dead. That is why William Holden is probably dead. That is why Natalie Wood is probably dead. That is why Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys is probably dead. That's why Marilyn Monroe is probably dead. That's why Inger Stevens was probably murdered. That's why Thomas Albert Decker was probably murdered in a humiliating way in his bathtub in East Hollywood. Because they won't follow their orders. They don't follow orders. And then they're made an example of to the other knuckleheads who are in the clandestine service business, who may be thinking about quitting, resigning, building a 289-foot sailboat with money that doesn't really belong to them. None of these people really have control of all of their money. They have control of some of their money, but most of their money is under the control of the bank, who's above Tom Perkins, above Eugene Kleiner, above Don Valentine, high above Doug Leone, high above Enos Mejia, high above Abigail Folger, high above Timothy Leary, quantum leaps above Sleepy Joe Biden, quantum leaps above fake Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, fake Governor Gavin Newsom of California. These are puppets. They are on puppet master strings. And that's what Don Valentine was at Sequoia Capital from the Bronx. He's on a string. He's on strings. All right, so what I wanted to tell you briefly is that if I can do anything briefly, I think these people are all Jewish. And if they're not Jewish, why are they concealing the background of their parents? And why do they have wives that are Jewish? Don Valentine had no wife. Why would you delete that? Why would you say you have 3 children and 6 grandchildren, but you have no wife, unless they're Jewish? How come Tom Perkins, who has no information about his parents, says he had a Norwegian wife number 1, but his second wife, Danielle Steele, she's Jewish from New York? And just to let you know that they do give us clues here. They do. They give us a lot of clues. This Tom Perkins character, he's a real sociopath. He's very much of a sociopath. All right. So he wrote a book. He was married to Danielle Steele, the romance novelist. He married her in 1998. But of course, they didn't last long. I think they had a 2-year marriage. Then he wrote a book called Sex and the Single Zillionaire. He told 60 Minutes, CBS, in an interview that he was not a billionaire, that he made many people billionaires, but not himself. But then he brags that he has a $150 million sailboat that cost less than $300 million to build. But he sold it for $60 million. I think you'd have to be kind of close to the billionaire category to throw money away on a sailboat, which you're going to spend very little time on and have to pay enormous maintenance costs to keep it. But then he writes a book. Well, someone wrote a book, a novel entitled Sex and the Single Zillionaire. So what is a zillionaire? He's basically, we know that Tom Perkins is more than he's more than a millionaire, but he says he's less than a billionaire. But he writes a book where he's having sex and he's a single zillionaire. And was married to Danielle Steele, a Jewish woman from New York City. The boat, the 289-foot clipper yacht, was named the Maltese Falcon. Now, for all you Humphrey Bogart fans out there, I'm sure you can tell me the clandestine service messaging here, from our Casablanca star Humphrey Bogart and the Maltese Falcon. There's some symbol messaging going on with having a 289-foot clipper yacht. Let me tell you something. If you really were a competitive sailboat sailor, you wouldn't be like Larry Ellison and you wouldn't be like Tom Perkins, because they're in a category where it's not competitive at all. You can just write a check and decide who's going to win the race. No one on the planet Earth has a 289-foot sailboat except him. So he would have a race of one person. That's not a Corinthian sport. You would have an El Toro or a dinghy or a kayak, or you'd have a Tempest, a standardized ship, a boat that's under 30 feet long, and you'd be in a category that's affordable, and there would be literally hundreds of sailors that you could race. But when you're in a category where you have to spend $150 million to build a yacht, there's no competition involved in that. It's completely out of the realm of competitive or Corinthian sport. It's entertainment. It's ridiculous. Tom Perkins also had a Bugatti collection of cars. That is also in the preposterous, ridiculous category. He said he was a multimillionaire, but he wasn't a billionaire. Well, when he died, it was reported in the New York Times that he had a net worth of over $8 billion. So, I don't believe anything the New York Times says. I also don't believe anything that Tom Perkins says. They're all pathological liars. And you can extend that to all the partners at Kleiner Perkins. None of these people know what they're doing. They're all went to indoctrination schools, and they're doing a job to wire the money as they're instructed. None of them are really important. You could do their job with artificial intelligence. I'm sure that Abigail Folger could have done all their jobs all their jobs very easily and still have time to go play the piano. All right, so I guess what I wanted to tell you is that these names of people such as Eugene, Kleiner, and Tom Perkins, and Don Valentine, and Jerome Colberg, that they're basically frauds, okay? They're posing, they're actors. They're pretending to be bankers. They have no formal banking training. And yet there they are, because anybody can be a money laundering private banker. Anybody, including Abigail Folger, including Ines Mejia, who I think was one of the best money laundering bankers in the history of San Francisco, was Ines Mejia. Nobody even suspected that that's what she was. But that's what she was. She wasn't a secretary. Are you crazy? She was the senior adult supervision in field for the San Francisco CIA operations. Ines Mejia. Check it out. It's not an accident that she came from Piedmont, where Robert Strange McNamara came out of. All right. Now, what I wanted to tell you is the Barbarians at the Gate characters. It was James Gardner who played the president of RGR Nabisco, Ross Johnson. It was played by James Gardner. Jonathan Price played Henry Kravis of KKR. Jonathan Price. I don't even know who he is. That's how important I think Henry Kravis is, which is that he's a tiresome man. Trying to see here what kind of other films that Jonathan Price was in. See what? Oh, yeah. He plays a real odious Hollywood character. He was in Breaking Glass, Loophole, Brazil, The Doctor and the Devils. He was in the Racial Papers, Consuming Passions, Man on Fire. He was in Stigmata. He was in Very Annie Mary, Bride of the Wind, Brothers of the Head, The New World, Hysteria, G.I. Joe Retaliation, The Two Popes, Save the Cinema, One Life, Scrooge, A Christmas Carol, The Old Knives, Doe, Woman in Gold. He was a very busy boy. This is the knucklehead that they chose to play Henry Kravis, was Jonathan Price. He was born John Price in 1947. He's a Welsh actor, and he's won 2 Laurence Olivier Awards. This is the knucklehead who portrayed Henry Kravis, a Jewish boy from Texas, whose parents had contacts with Joe Kennedy. Kravis. He went to Claremont McKenna College, which is another spook school in California, in Claremont, California, near Ontario, Motor Speedway, out that way. All right, thanks for listening. Have a great day, and please hit the like and subscribe. Have a good one. Bye-bye.